or discover the knife she had hidden beneath her pillow for protection. I never held it against her. My tolerance and trust made Emily feel as though her throat had been blocked by something. She had countless words of gratitude she wanted to say to me, yet she could not utter a single one. In Emily's ears echoed something her grandmother had once told her: all you need in life is to meet the one person who is truly right for you. When she was little, she never understood why her parents were always fighting. That was how her grandmother had answered her. Now she finally understood. Although this kind of happiness was something many people could spend their entire lives searching for without finding, deep down she felt incredibly fortunate because she had met me. She took several deep breaths to calm her emotions. She slowly walked over to the bed and picked up the thing that had once given her a false sense of security, the fruit knife, then silently placed it inside the cabinet drawer. She would no longer need something so cold from now on. When she returned to the living room, I was taking 2 containers of yogurt out of the refrigerator. I opened one with a smile and held the lid coated with creamy yogurt near her lips. Having some yogurt after a meal is good for you. Lick it clean and don't waste it. Emily stared blankly at the lid right in front of her. I stood beneath the warm yellow light and smiled at her, then gently waved the lid in my hand. The tips of her ears burned red. She obediently parted her lips and leaned toward the plastic lid. The instant her tongue curled around the yogurt, its sweet and tangy flavor spread across her tongue. Seeing how adorable she looked like a little kitten, I found myself staring at her in a daze. I was worried you wouldn't like the plain flavor, so I opened a sweet one for you. What do you think? It's pretty good. I opened my own container and gulped it down. She noticed the smear of yogurt at the corner of my mouth and instinctively picked up a tissue to gently wipe it away. Only after doing that did she suddenly realize how intimate our position looked. She hurriedly stepped backward, then sat back down on the sofa in embarrassment, holding the yogurt with both hands as she drank it in small sips. Although she appeared to be obediently enjoying her yogurt, I knew all her attention was focused on me. I watched her with great interest. My gaze traveled from her faintly trembling knees to her tightly clenched hands. Her embarrassment was betrayed by her exposed ankles, which unconsciously rubbed lightly against each other. I saw straight through her nervousness and found it incredibly amusing. So I smiled and sat down beside her. Ms. Babysitter, can I borrow your shoulder for a little nap? Lying flat right after eating would be uncomfortable. It would be nice to have someone to lean on. Emily blushed and nodded. When I gently leaned against her, the ends of my hair brushed across her collarbone. Her entire body immediately stiffened, as though even the blood in her veins had frozen. My breath fell against the side of her neck. All she could do was hold her breath, try to match the rhythm of mine. Those 5 minutes felt both fleeting and endless to her. The gentle breeze outside the window tousled her hair. Several strands fell across my forehead, making me frown slightly. She mischievously reached out and gathered up those strands, gently brushing them back and forth across my forehead, but just then I shifted, and my forehead pressed directly against her cheek, while half my head rested against her chest. Distinct fragrance suddenly filled my senses. My eyes snapped open. When I realized the position I was in, I hurriedly sat upright. I can't believe I actually fell asleep. Sorry, I didn't mean to take advantage of you. You keep saying I haven't been doing well. But you don't seem much better yourself, since you can fall asleep so quickly while leaning on me. Then sleep a little longer, feeling her hand resting against my cheek and gently stroking it. I smiled and said nothing more, then closed my eyes again without worry. In my previous life when I was a homicide detective, my sleep had always been shallow because I constantly needed to stay alert. This was the first time I had ever been beside someone else, and managed to fall asleep so quickly and peacefully. Gradually, she also rested her forehead against me as the gentle breeze drifted in, then fell asleep without even realizing it. We slept like that until at some point I toppled over, with my head pillowed on her soft thighs. I was curled slightly on my side as though hugging a pillow, both arms wrapped tightly around her slender waist. Emily slowly woke up and saw the scene before her. Her small face immediately turned bright red, but she did not resist. Instead, she gently placed her hand on my back, watching me cling tightly to her like a little puppy. She was utterly captivated. The alarm suddenly rang, jolting me awake from my dream. The moment I woke up, I realized I was holding something soft, with my head still resting on her thighs. I immediately sprang off the sofa in alarm. Whoa, be careful. Since when had I started sleeping so restlessly? I scratched my head, looking completely bewildered, then hurried into the bathroom to wash my face. When I came out, I saw her smiling brightly at me, completely unconcerned by my disrespectful behavior just now. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. The truth was, I had been afraid that getting too close and behaving so intimately would upset her, or make her feel taken advantage of. Now that I had confirmed her feelings for me were strong enough, I immediately made a decision. Let's go pick up your things from your place and bring them here. Dusk had just begun to fall. The last rays of sunset dyed the old apartment complex where Emily lived, a stifling shade of orange-red. The closer we got to her front door, the more I could feel Emily beside me, growing stiffer with every step. Her heartbeat seemed to echo through the silent hallway as several residents came and went. Their gazes kept sweeping over our faces. Wow, Emily's boyfriend is really handsome. Mrs. Lewis, who was notorious for prying into everyone else's business, teased us with a laugh as she headed downstairs. Emily's face turned crimson, but she did not deny it. She only lowered her head further. I paid no attention to the gossip and took her hand as we headed straight up to the 4th floor. At that moment, Emily did not even realize that she had not led the way once. Yet I had still stopped at the exact door to her home. We arrived at apartment 402. Emily took out her key, but her hands trembled so badly that she could not get it into the lock. I could imagine how heavy the click of that lock opening must have felt to her. Her mind had gone completely blank, with no idea what awaited her behind the door. Seeing her frozen in place, too afraid to open it, I reached out and turned the handle for her. The moment the door opened, the apartment was completely silent. Emily let out a breath of relief. Not having to face her mother right away allowed her taut nerves to loosen slightly. Just as we thought no one was home, a bedroom door suddenly opened, and a boy about 7 years old stepped out. He was her half-brother Noah, who shared the same mother. Sis, where have you been these past few days? I went to a classmate's house. Noah, where are Mom and Dad? No matter how badly her parents treated her, she had always considered this little brother family. It was just that every time she saw him, she remembered how openly their parents favored him, spoiling him while neglecting her, leaving her with emotions too tangled to describe. Mom and Dad are at the hospital. Mom will probably be back soon to make dinner. Is this handsome guy your boyfriend, Sis? At her brother's question, Emily's cheeks immediately flushed. She instinctively stole a glance at me. When she saw no reaction from me, she did not explain either. But when she heard that her mother would be home soon, panic immediately seized her, and she decided to pack her things as quickly as possible. But the moment she heard the word hospital, the bloody truth deliberately buried on that stormy night resurfaced in both my memory and Emily's. Decided night, Mrs. Carter had forced Emily to hand over her phone for inspection, then found photos in her camera roll that Emily had secretly taken of me. Mrs. Carter's mental state had already been extremely fragile. Because her ex-husband, Mr. Carter, had once cheated on her, those photos struck the most sensitive nerve in her. In that instant, Mrs. Carter poured all the hatred she felt for her ex-husband, onto Emily, humiliating her with the cruelest words imaginable. She called her shameless while Emily stared back in despair and hurt. Mrs. Carter had completely lost her mind. She even grabbed the fruit knife from the table and screamed that she would slash her daughter's face apart. Seeing this, her stepfather, Mr. Wilson, desperately rushed forward to wrestle the knife away. During the struggle, the blade suddenly changed direction. Amid the chaos, Mrs. Carter drove the knife deep into Mr. Wilson's stomach. Only the smell of blood snapped Mrs. Carter out of her frenzy. She collapsed into the pool of blood and wailed bitterly. At the time, Mr. Wilson had recklessly rushed forward to stop the knife, not because he wanted to protect Emily, but because he wanted to protect the wife he loved so deeply from committing the serious crime of murder. He had secretly loved Mrs. Carter since childhood, with a stubborn and pitiful devotion. Even if his wife had gone insane, he was still willing to do everything in his power to protect her. Yet he could not spare even a trace of affection for his innocent stepdaughter, faced with her husband lying in a pool of blood. Mrs. Carter turned and glared viciously at Emily, who was frozen in terror, then screamed, "You jinx, get out of my house." Go as far away as possible. And just like that, Emily, without a cent to her name, was driven out into the hopeless storm. I shook my head and pushed those brutal memories out of my mind. Emily told her brother to go back to his room and do his homework, then pulled me into her bedroom. She dragged out a pink suitcase and hurriedly began stuffing clothes inside. I looked around the room, my gaze settling on a notebook inside a drawer with a tiny lock attached to it. In my previous life, I had opened that diary after she died. Its pages were packed with entries, all of them happy moments she had forced herself to record, so she could find the courage to keep living. In this life, I did not touch it, although Emily never said what she wanted to bring. I knew her well enough to quietly take out the books she treasured most, along with her notebooks, and arrange them neatly on the table. When she finished packing her clothes and turned around, she discovered that everything I had chosen was exactly what she wanted to take, while everything else had been left behind. She froze in place, her eyes filling with indescribable emotion. It turned out that while she had been quietly watching me, the boy she cared about had also been paying such close attention to her. After placing everything inside the suitcase, Emily took out a sheet of paper and left behind a few brief words. We pulled the suitcase out of the room. Emily placed the note on the dining table, then turned and prepared to walk toward the front door. The lock suddenly clicked. A moment later, the door swung open, and Mrs. Carter unexpectedly appeared in the doorway. The air instantly froze. Emily's hand trembled violently around the suitcase handle. Mrs. Carter also stood rooted to the spot, until Noah heard the noise and opened his bedroom door, calling out, "Mom, I'm hungry," and finally breaking the silence. Mrs. Carter forced down her anger and gently coaxed her son back into his room. The instant his bedroom door closed, her expression immediately turned cold. She stared at Emily in disbelief. "What is the meaning of this? You think you're grown now and don't need me anymore. You think I can't control you now. You found a man and now you plan to run away with him." Emily bit her lip without saying a word. Last Friday night, the words "go as far away as possible" were still echoing in her ears. "Do you have any idea how hard it was for me to carry you for 9 months and give birth to you? Now you think you can just turn around and leave. Did you even ask for my permission? Do you still see me as your mother?" Tears immediately spilled from Emily's eyes. She was not crying because she had been scolded. She was crying because her heart had broken. The last hope she had held for even a little tenderness from her mother, completely shattered at that moment. To preserve the last shred of dignity between them, she did not want to turn against her mother and argue. Seeing her silently shedding tears in such pain, my expression turned cold as I strode forward and firmly placed myself in front of her. "Mrs. Carter, Emily reaching this point today was never the outcome she wanted. You and her stepfather forced her into a corner with your own hands. I already spoke to your teacher. You don't need to joke around with me. I know exactly what rich boys like you are really like," she said before turning toward Emily, her expression becoming unbearably anguished. "He is handsome and wealthy, the same kind of man as your father. When he likes you, he will spoil you and say anything to make you happy. Once he gets tired of you, he will throw you aside. Haven't you learned anything from what happened to me? Sooner or later, he will get sick of you and abandon you. It is still not too late for you to come to your senses." Hearing those vicious assumptions, Emily looked at me through tear-filled eyes. She did not believe I could ever be that kind of person. Besides, we had not even officially defined our relationship yet. I took a deep breath and gently wiped Emily's tears away with my sleeve. I have never liked making empty promises about loving someone for 10,000 years, with nothing but pretty words. I only know that if I love someone now, then I should treasure her now. You are right that no one can truly guarantee the future. But there is one thing I know. When Emily is with me, everything she receives and keeps will become a happy memory. That is enough. I don't care what sweet lies you tell her. I am warning you seriously. Stay away from my daughter. And I am warning you just as seriously. Emily is an adult. She also has a steady job and income. Legally speaking, she has every right to escape your forced control. If you want to love her as her mother, you will always be welcome. But if all you want is for her to remain a puppet on your strings, then I'm sorry, but I will never allow it. Mrs. Carter picked up the note with trembling hands. When she saw the words $6,000 a month in salary, her pupils instantly contracted. She suddenly realized that inside her daughter's frail body was a fierce determination to resist her. Fine, 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 so you think having money makes you impressive. Don't talk to me about the law. If you dare take her away, I will bring the police straight to your house. Even if you call the police, we are still in the right. But have you thought about the consequences of making this public? Noah is still young. I'm sure you don't want your actions to make him the target of rumors and isolation at school. Every word struck where it hurt most. My words hit Mrs. Carter's weakness perfectly. She believed she already owed her current husband far too much. She could never allow her husband and son to suffer because of her. Fine, fine, fine. Both of you, get out of here. Remember this when this rich boy gets tired of playing with you. Don't come crying and begging me to take you back. You think you're stepping into a gilded cage, but you will regret it soon enough. I bent down and picked up the largest piece of broken porcelain. Its sharp edge pressed a red mark into my palm as I said, "You're wrong. I have no intention of building a cage for her. I will cherish her like a canary, but I will also teach her how to grow wings and fly toward a world that belongs entirely to her." My words sent waves crashing through Emily's heart. Tears still clung to her lashes. She suddenly gathered her courage and grabbed my wrist, then followed me toward the door. "You are all nothing but ungrateful wretches. Go, and get out of here, all of you." Seeing how her mother suddenly looked so old and exhausted, Emily's tears poured down her face. But she forced down her reluctance and said, "Goodbye, Mom. Everything I wanted to say is written on the note on the dining table." She pulled her suitcase and quickly walked out the door. She was afraid that if she stopped for even one more second, she would no longer have the courage to leave. As we reached the turn in the stairwell, the motion sensor light in the hallway suddenly came on. A hoarse voice suddenly called from upstairs, "Emily." The cry startled the sparrows on the windowsill into flight. Emily's entire body shook violently. The suitcase wheel caught on the edge of a step. I could clearly feel her fingertips instantly turn rigid, like a butterfly's wings frozen in ice. Accompanied by hurried footsteps, Mrs. Carter rushed down the stairs too quickly and stumbled forward. Her forehead even struck the wall and began to bleed. "Emily, don't go. This is all my fault. I was wrong. I won't scold you anymore." Hearing her mother call her Emmy, Emily instantly lost control. Tears poured from her eyes as she threw herself into her mother's arms. Seeing this, I was shocked to realize that the Mrs. Carter before me was completely different from the woman moments ago. Her expression, voice, and actions had all changed entirely. It was only much later that I learned the overwhelming trauma Mrs. Carter had endured had caused her to develop dissociative identity disorder. Only on rare occasions, when Emily showed extreme vulnerability, would the third personality who deeply loved her daughter emerge, and the affectionate name Emmy she had just called was the sign that this loving mother had returned. "I'm sorry, but I still have to leave. I truly couldn't bear the days without you." Emily knew her mother would soon return to that volatile personality, which only strengthened her resolve to leave. The reason she wanted to study psychology was because she hoped to cure her mother, so the mother who truly loved her could remain forever. "Mrs. Carter, if you truly love Emily, please trust me with her. I promise I will never let her suffer even the slightest hurt. I've been such a useless mother. Ever since she was little, she has never known how to speak about the pain she carries inside. Please take extra care of her for me." Mrs. Carter bent down and clasped my hand and Emily's together. Her hand was as cold as ice, yet it made our skin burn where we touched. Finally, she gently caressed the little sunshine doll charm hanging from Emily's suitcase, then waved goodbye to us with a loving smile. Emily looked back every 3 steps, but her tears had been replaced by a peaceful smile. After finally lowering all her defenses, Emily was as excited as a bird reborn. She pulled the suitcase with one hand and tightly hugged my arm with the other, happily leaning her entire body against me. My arm could feel the softness of her body. Her joy was contagious, and I couldn't help laughing too. Inside the taxi taking us home, even the driver noticed the change in her. He joked that she must have just won the lottery, but a vague uneasiness stirred inside me. Before we got into the car, I had clearly sensed that someone seemed to be watching us from the shadows. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing," I said with a smile and shook my head. Could it really have been nothing more than my imagination? I looked out the car window one last time. and forced down the suspicion in my heart. The bell signaling the start of evening study had just rung. The classroom was filled with the smell of fresh ink from books and the heavy rustling of turning pages. Emily sat to my right, carefully reorganizing her notebook of incorrect answers. Ever since escaping that suffocating home that afternoon, she had become like a young sprout, finally seeing sunlight for the first time. Even the strands of her hair seemed lighter and more carefree, but I could not relax. Ever since we stepped out of the taxi, the chilling sensation of being watched by a venomous snake had clung to me like a shadow. The investigative instincts I had honed over 10 years told me that our stalker had followed us into the school. I pretended to casually hold the pen in my hand, but my gaze remained focused, locked on the reflection in the glass panel of the front door. The motion sensor light in the hallway had never gone out. That meant someone was still standing in the camera's blind spot, silently watching us. Ethan, I feel like I'm missing a frictional force in the force analysis for this physics problem. Could you take a look for me? As she leaned closer, carrying a faint citrus scent, I took the sheet of scratch paper from her, but at that exact moment the corner of my eye caught a glimpse in the glass panel of the front door of a figure in a black raincoat flashing past. The figure quickly ducked back behind the wall. You overlooked the static friction on the inclined plane, but this problem can wait. Emily, listen to me. For the next 5 minutes, no matter what happens, stay in your seat and do not leave the classroom under any circumstances. Did something happen? Where are you going? Don't be afraid. I'm going to catch the debt-collecting demon that followed us all the way here. Remember, there are plenty of people in this classroom. That makes it the safest place for you. Wait for me to come back. I gave Emily no chance to ask more questions. I immediately shot to my feet, pulled my chair aside, and strode out through the back door. The moment I stepped into the hallway, the gentleness vanished from my face, and in its place was the coldness of the homicide captain I had been in my previous life, the man whose name had once terrified serial killers. I deliberately made my footsteps heavy and headed toward the most secluded area at the end of the hallway, the old laboratory building. The lighting there was dim, and the security cameras had been broken for years. If the stalker wanted to make a move, that place would be the perfect hunting ground. Sure enough, as I entered the cold corridor connecting to the laboratory building, extremely faint footsteps immediately sounded behind me. The person was deliberately keeping his heels from touching the floor. The rubber soles of his shoes scraped against the terrazzo. The sound amplified endlessly through the empty corridor. I sneered coldly because the prey had taken the bait. I suddenly pushed open the door to the old chemistry lab and slipped into the blind spot behind it. After holding my breath for 10 seconds, a rough hand slowly pushed the door open. A weak beam from a flashlight shone inside. I lunged from behind the door like a hunting leopard, my left hand forming a precise claw. As I seized the wrist holding the flashlight and twisted it outward with tremendous force, a pained groan rang out. As the flashlight crashed to the floor, I did not pause for even a second. My right hand immediately gripped the back of his head, using the momentum of his body pitching forward. I drove my knee hard into his stomach. Not a single movement in that close combat restraint sequence was wasted. It was an overwhelming difference in skill. The stalker instantly lost all ability to resist. He convulsed in pain and collapsed to the floor. I planted one foot on his chest, pinning him firmly against the ground, then bent down and picked up the flashlight, shining the beam directly into his face. When I saw the features twisted in agony, my pupils instantly contracted. The man lying on the floor was none other than Emily's stepfather, Mr. Wilson, the man who had risked his life on that stormy night last Friday to protect his wife while she was in the middle of a psychotic episode, and had been stabbed in the stomach. The wound on his abdomen clearly had not fully healed. The pain left his forehead covered in cold sweat, yet he still stared at me with bloodshot eyes. From the pocket of his raincoat, a razor-sharp knife suddenly fell out. You're still supposed to be recovering in the hospital, instead of resting properly in bed. You came here with an unhealed stab wound, dressed like this, and followed me into the school. What exactly are you trying to do? Why do you insist on protecting her? After the two of you left this afternoon, Mrs. Carter completely broke down at the hospital. She kept smashing her head against the bed rail. If the doctors had not intervened in time and injected her with a sedative, she would never have been able to endure it. As long as Emily remains in Riverton for even one more day, Mrs. Carter will never recover. She has to disappear from Riverton completely. I want her dead. Seeing the madness on Mr. Wilson's face, the scattered suspicions from my previous life, furiously snapped together in that instant. On that stormy night in my previous life, the killer in the raincoat had perfectly avoided every security camera, then brutally murdered Emily in a dead-end alley. Could it be that the killer had never been some random thug, but the stepfather standing before me who, for the sake of his wife, had descended into complete madness? Had he also done the same thing that night as he had today, secretly sneaking out of the hospital despite his injuries, following Emily and then murdering her? I immediately made my decision, without wasting another word. I called the police directly and reported him for stalking while armed with a knife and intending to attack. Mr. Wilson was taken away in a police car. But, as I watched the vehicle speed away with its siren wailing, it felt as though a cord inside me had been pulled taut, and no matter what I did, I could not relax. Early the next morning, I found an excuse to take half a day off from school. Using my dad's connections throughout the city, I claimed that the family wanted to verify the condition of his injury and entered the city hospital's surveillance room. Without concrete evidence proving that he was the murderer, I did not dare draw any conclusions, because during the investigation in my previous life, his motive had been the first possibility ruled out. Moreover, he had a solid alibi. I had to confirm it with my own eyes. On that stormy night last Friday, what exactly had Mr. Wilson been doing? Could you pull up the hallway surveillance footage outside the emergency operating room from 8 to 10 that night? And let me take a look. The image on the monitor flickered before quickly switching scenes. At 8:15, Mr. Wilson was wheeled into the operating room covered in blood. At 8:40, the red light above the operating room was still on. Several nurses kept rushing in and out carrying bags of blood. At 9:02, Mr. Wilson was wheeled out of the operating room, covered in tubes before being transferred to the intensive care unit, all the way until 11. No one entered or left the intensive care unit. A man with such severe injuries could not possibly have jumped from the third-floor hospital balcony. It felt as though lightning had struck my mind. My hands and feet instantly turned ice cold. According to the medical examiner's estimate, the time Emily died in my previous life had been around 10,003 that night. His alibi was unshakable. On that stormy night in my previous life, Mr. Wilson had been lying on an operating table. He could not possibly have been in that alley hunting down Emily. So if the killer was not her stepfather, Mr. Wilson, then who was it? When I walked out through the hospital gates, the midday sunlight was so blinding that I could barely keep my eyes open. Mr. Wilson's perfect alibi, pressed against my chest like an enormous boulder. Who was the killer hiding in the storm? In my previous life, the fear of having an enemy hidden in the darkness while I stood exposed in the light made me far more uneasy than confronting a demon face to face. I pushed open the front door and stepped inside. The apartment was completely silent. A faint scent of body wash lingered in the air. I quietly entered the guest room. Emily was curled beneath the blanket taking an afternoon nap. She was not sleeping peacefully. Her long lashes trembled faintly, and one hand unconsciously clutched a corner of the blanket, looking at her peaceful sleeping face that still seemed so vulnerable. Most of the tension inside me immediately faded. I walked over, intending to pull the thin blanket back over her. The moment I raised my head, my gaze happened to sweep across the guest room window. My movements suddenly froze. The afternoon sunlight fell diagonally across the glass. On the outside of the window, a faint handprint had unexpectedly appeared, clearly covered in dirt. Every hair on my body instantly stood on end. I held my breath. Then, immediately turned and pushed open the door, circling around to the flower bed outside the apartment. Sure enough, at the edge of the lawn beneath the guest room window, several bushes had been trampled crooked. A trail of messy footprints was pressed into the soil. The direction of those footprints pointed straight toward the window where Emily had been sleeping. My heartbeat suddenly accelerated. That person had just been standing right here. He had even placed his hand against the glass, separated by only a thin window pane. As he stared at the sleeping girl inside, a tidal wave of danger swallowed me whole. I never expected him to follow us all the way here. Although the apartment complex had security guards, they still could not stop a demon determined to remain hidden. I absolutely could not sit around waiting to die. That afternoon, I went straight to the electronics district and bought 3 boxes of the most advanced equipment available. High-definition infrared cameras with night vision, along with vibration-sensitive alarms for the windowsills. I carried the folding ladder myself, moving back and forth around the apartment and living room, drilling into walls and running cables. The noise woke Emily up. She came out wearing loose-fitting loungewear, rubbing her sleepy eyes as she walked out of the room. "What are you doing? Why did you buy so many cameras?" "I'm a little paranoid about someone coming after me. Living on the first floor may be convenient, but installing a few more cameras to deter burglars is still a good idea. Come over here and hold the ladder for me. Are you worried that I won't be safe home alone?" You already know the answer, so why ask? While installing a camera in the corner of the living room ceiling, I needed support from somewhere higher up. Emily rose onto her tiptoes, trying to hand me the connecting cable, because she stretched too forcefully. Her delicate collarbones and a patch of fair skin were exposed. Standing above her and looking down, my gaze accidentally swept over her, and my throat instantly felt a little dry. "All right, hold it steady. I'm coming down now." As I climbed down the ladder, I accidentally glanced at her again. Emily noticed my gaze, and her face immediately turned bright red. She let out a startled cry and released the ladder. I lost my balance and fell straight down. Emily hurriedly spread her arms to catch me. I took advantage of the momentum and leaned sideways, dropping more than half my weight onto her and pulling her directly into my arms. "You need to be more careful. Did you twist your ankle?" "I didn't twist my ankle. I was just startled a moment ago, so my legs feel a little weak. Ms. Babysitter, you failed to protect me properly. You'll have to take responsibility." That's what you get for acting shamelessly. Although that was what she said, her small hands hesitated for a moment before gently wrapping around my waist, returning my warm embrace filled with her soft fragrance. The tension and irritation that had plagued me all day were finally soothed for a moment. After dinner, I sat on the sofa, adjusting the split-screen surveillance display on my computer. Emily washed a plate of fresh strawberries, then obediently sat beside me, spearing the largest one with a toothpick and holding it to my lips. I turned my head while continuing to watch the monitor. The lawn outside the window, every hidden corner nearby, and every possible point of entry were covered by high-definition cameras without a single blind spot. If the ghost who had left those footprints dared appear again, I would make sure he could not escape even if he grew wings. "Emily, from now on, whenever you're home, unless I unlock the door with my key, do not respond, no matter who knocks. Remember, I mean absolutely anyone." "Okay, I'll remember." The afternoon sun warmed the asphalt beneath our feet. Emily walked beside me with her backpack on, her ponytail swaying with every step, ever since moving into my apartment, and escaping that suffocating house. Even her footsteps had become much lighter. From time to time, she would lean closer and share with me the questions she had reviewed and corrected that day. But I still could not relax. The needle-like sensation of being watched would not leave me. From the moment we stepped through the apartment complex gates, it had clung tightly to the back of my neck. "Walk a little farther inside. There are too many cars near the street." "Ethan, what's wrong?" "Your palm is covered in sweat. I didn't get any rest at noon because I was installing all those cameras. Let's hurry. Our first class this afternoon is with our homeroom teacher. We'll get scolded if we're late." I kept a calm expression, but the corners of my eyes rapidly scanned the shops along the street, along with the landscaped planters. There was no one hiding in the blind spots, but that slimy sensation of being watched by a venomous snake could not possibly be wrong. We had barely entered the school gates when Ryan's unmistakably loud voice called out from the shade beneath the classroom building. He ran straight toward me with his face flushed red, so excited that his words came out in a jumble. "Ethan, damn, you really are incredible. That lead you gave us about the wanted criminal actually turned out to be real. The entire police department has been thrown into chaos. They said that bastard is the same man who has traveled through 3 states, with several lives on his hands. Did they catch him?" At the mention of that, half of Ryan's excited expression instantly collapsed. That place was seriously cursed. The police sealed off the entire old district. They surrounded it from every direction so tightly that not even water could get through. There was no way we could get anywhere near it. Yet that guy vanished as though he had evaporated from the face of the earth. I heard his counter-surveillance skills are terrifyingly good. Just minutes before the perimeter completely closed in, He jumped into a drainage ditch and escaped through the sewer system. A chill suddenly spread to my heart. Ryan's words were like a cold, surgical blade, instantly cutting apart every hopeful assumption I had made. The serial killer from my previous life, although he had not been directly connected to Emily's death, was still a remorseless murderer, an incredibly cunning madman. The fact that he had escaped such a dense police perimeter proved that he was now hiding somewhere in the darkness of this city, like a cornered beast in a panic. I remembered what had happened at noon, outside the window of my apartment, the faint handprint covered in dirt, and the messy trail of footprints across the lawn. If the true killer from that stormy night in my previous life had still not revealed himself, then could the man who climbed up to the window and watched her that afternoon have been this desperate murderer himself? Could it be that while evading capture, had he randomly chosen my apartment, a home that looked like it belonged to someone wealthy, as his hiding place? Or did he want revenge on the person who provided the lead? So he was secretly investigating me and scouting the area. Ryan, listen carefully. For the foreseeable future, other than school and the hospital, you are not allowed to go anywhere. What's wrong, hubby? I just got the reward money, and I was planning to treat you to some grilled skewers. Why do you look so serious? That wanted criminal isn't just a murderer. He is also a madman with no limits. You provided the lead and collected the reward. Once he hears about it and learns that you called the police, you and your mom will be the first people he takes revenge on. No way, it can't be that serious. I'm still the big shot around this neighborhood. The number of lives he has taken is greater than the amount of blood you have ever seen. Stop talking nonsense. Go straight to the hospital after school and stay there. Tell your mom to lock the hospital room door. Even if God himself calls her, she must not step outside. Do you understand? I understand, hubby. Don't scare me like that. I don't care much about my worthless life, but my mom can't handle that kind of terror. After sending Ryan away, I stood in the shadows outside the hallway, watching Emily quietly reading inside the classroom. A constant chill ran down my back. Mr. Wilson's name had been cleared. The true killer from the stormy night was still hiding in the darkness. And now, a fugitive serial killer had appeared as well. Two unknown sources of murderous intent intertwined, surrounding us without leaving a single opening. I touched the phone in my pocket. On its screen, the surveillance system inside my home was still silently running. No matter who had left those footprints outside the window, the moment you dared appear, I would make you pay the price. After evening study ended, Emily and I walked home side by side. Although the night breeze was slightly cold, she seemed to enjoy the sense of security that came from having someone beside her throughout the entire walk. She happily chatted with me about amusing things that had happened in class. After we arrived home, Emily voluntarily put on an apron and headed into the kitchen. Long. 2 steaming bowls of tomato and egg noodles along with several small side dishes were placed on the table. Ethan, hurry and try it. I added the fried egg you like today. I even made the edges extra crispy for you. As long as you cooked it, I'll finish everything without leaving a single bite. You're talking nonsense again. Hurry and eat before the noodles get soggy. The warm yellow light in the dining room fell across her slightly flushed face, wrapping her in a soft glow. I ate the noodles in large mouthfuls, enjoying this rare moment of peace. After dinner, Emily went into the bathroom. The rushing sound of water soon filled the room. I leaned back against the sofa and opened my phone, switching to the outdoor surveillance system that I had installed earlier that day. In the nighttime footage, the infrared lights clearly illuminated every flower bed surrounding the apartment. I casually reviewed the recording from around dusk. Then my gaze suddenly froze at a little after 6 in the evening before we had returned home. An unfamiliar man wearing a baseball cap had paced around the flower bed outside my apartment for more than 10 minutes. He had even repeatedly craned his neck to look through the window. I immediately enlarged the image, carefully studying the contours of his face. The man was slightly overweight, with drooping outer corners to his eyes. Inside my mind, there quickly appeared the wanted poster released by the police. It wasn't him because the wanted criminal was a thin man, with prominent cheekbones. This was not the fugitive. Then where had this rat come from? Could he be the real killer who had hidden in the shadows in my previous life? Coming here to scout the area, the feeling of having an enemy in the darkness while I stood exposed in the light made me deeply uncomfortable. The fugitive serial killer. the unidentified killer from the stormy night in my previous life. And now another stranger had appeared near my home in broad daylight. I felt as though I were standing at the center of an enormous black vortex, being dragged deeper and deeper inside. The clock gradually approached 1 in the morning. The entire apartment complex sank into deathly silence. I lay on the bed in the master bedroom, although my eyes were closed. My nerves remained taut and vigilant, just as they had when I was a homicide detective in my previous life. Suddenly, an extremely faint crack came from outside the apartment. It was followed by a series of nearly silent footsteps, deliberately keeping the heels from touching the ground. Slowly approaching the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, my eyes snapped open. Like a hunting leopard awakening from sleep, I silently rolled over and got out of bed. My feet made no sound against the floor as I pressed myself against the wall and slowly moved toward the blind spot beside the living room window. With the help of the faint moonlight, I looked through the gap between the curtains and vaguely saw a slender figure sneaking close to the outside wall of my apartment. The shadow's hand seemed to be searching for something along the windowsill. He even tried to gently push the window open. Every muscle in my body had tensed to its limit. The moment he made any suspicious move, I would charge out and cripple him. But I forced myself not to alert him prematurely. I wanted to see exactly what he intended to do, and whether he had any accomplices. Time passed minute by minute and second by second. The shadow remained outside the window for 2 or 3 minutes, apparently realizing the window had been tightly locked from the inside, or perhaps sensing something dangerous. He suddenly stopped moving, turned around, and quickly disappeared deep into the apartment complex's flower beds. My first instinct was to open the door and chase him, but just as my hand touched the doorknob, I forcibly stopped myself. I turned to look at the firmly closed guest room door. Emily was still sleeping soundly inside. Catching this rat was important. But Emily's absolute safety came first. I suppressed a murderous fury inside me, turned and walked toward the coffee table, then quickly opened the surveillance program on my computer and pulled up the infrared footage from the area where the man had just been standing. The video began rewinding. The shadow appeared on the screen. This high-end security equipment had exceptional resolution. Even every wrinkle in the intruder's clothing had been recorded clearly. I stared intently at the screen, dragging the progress bar. To the exact moment the shadow turned to leave. When he suddenly looked back, the infrared camera captured a clear frontal image of his face. The instant I saw that face clearly, my pupils contracted. A loud buzzing filled my head, as though someone had struck me across the skull with a club. That face usually hidden beneath thick bangs, with its timid and lonely expression. How could it possibly be him? The boy known as the class punching bag, student who was always bullied by the school thugs. Why would he be outside in the middle of the night, hiding beyond my window like a ghost? The dim blue glow of the computer screen illuminated my face. I did not turn on the lights. I sat alone on the sofa in the darkness, my fingers unconsciously tapping against my knee, my mind operating like a computer pushed to its limit, frantically reorganizing every seemingly unrelated clue. The overweight man who had appeared during the day, Dylan who had appeared at night, and the faint dirt-covered handprint on the guest room window. What connection was hidden between these three things? If the handprint had been left by the overweight man during the day, why had he only paced around the flower bed without making any further move? Who had sent him here? I took a deep breath and temporarily set aside the clue involving the overweight man. My gaze locked onto Dylan's face, frozen on the monitor, compared with the unidentified overweight man. Dylan's appearance sent an even stronger chill down my spine. He was a lonely and withdrawn student at school, who always endured everything in silence. Even when the school thugs demanded money from him, he never dared fight back. So why at 1 in the morning had he demonstrated such practiced stealth and appeared outside my window like a ghost? Once my investigative instincts were awakened, the details I had overlooked in my previous life immediately flooded into my mind like a tidal wave. I remembered the stormy night in my previous life. Dylan had also appeared near the crime scene that night. Several thugs had cornered and beaten him in the dead-end alley. It was because Emily had seen that scene as she left the convenience store that she entered the deadly alley in my previous life. I had always assumed that Dylan was merely someone, unlucky enough to be there by coincidence. But now this supposed victim had come in the middle of the night and secretly crept outside my window. Could it be that the person who snatched Emily's fruit knife on that stormy night in my previous life and brutally murdered her was Dylan? The instant that thought appeared, my sharp investigative instincts quickly began analyzing everything again. I closed my eyes and tried to remember what happened after Emily died in my previous life. The entire school had been shaken. The police came every day to take statements. Every student was terrified. But what about Dylan? During the period after Emily died, my previous life, Dylan still sat in the corner like an invisible man. He showed no trace of panic, not even the slightest unusual emotional reaction. His calmness was like a pool of stagnant water. No, that wasn't right, because I understood criminal psychology too well, faced with the police and an investigation surrounding him from every direction. There was no way he could conceal everything without revealing a flaw. Behind that carefully disguised calmness would have to be terrifying mental resilience and a mind so calculating that no one could see its depths. A teenager who trembled in fear even when thugs beat and cursed him could not possibly possess the mental strength of a murderer, a twisted killer, if he truly was that calculating. Then the timid and weak persona he showed at school, that made everyone think they could bully him, had been nothing more than an act. He was like a venomous snake wearing sheep's clothing, silently hiding beside everyone, coldly observing everything that happened. The clock on the wall continued ticking away. A sudden fear rose inside me. If Dylan truly had been that cold-blooded killer in my previous life, then his appearance here tonight could only mean that in this life he had already marked Emily and me as his prey, playing tricks and pretending to be a ghost. Whether a man or a demon was hiding beneath your mask, I would drag you into the light. I stood and walked to the guest room door, gently confirming that it was still securely locked, hearing Emily's steady breathing from inside. I silently clenched my fists. This ticking time bomb was right there in our classroom. I absolutely could not ignore it. I had made my decision. When I went to school tomorrow, I would find Dylan, tear away his harmless disguise, and uncover the entire truth about the stormy night and tonight, without leaving a single question unanswered. The early morning sunlight streamed through the screen door to the balcony, scattering warm patches of light across the wooden floor. I pushed open my bedroom door and stepped out. The sizzling sound of bacon frying came from the kitchen, along with the rich aroma of toasted bread. Emily wore a pure white pullover hoodie and stood on her tiptoes, bustling around the kitchen counter. The golden morning sunlight outlined her slender and gentle figure. The sight before me was so beautiful that it nearly made me forget the terror of last night. "Joe, lazy bones, since you're awake, hurry up and wash your face. The sandwiches are almost ready. I added the kind of cheese you like today. You're so good at taking care of a home. Whoever marries you someday will be blessed for 3 lifetimes. You're already teasing me this early in the morning. Go wash your face." After washing up, I sat down at the dining table, watching her take small bites of her sandwich. A little white dressing accidentally stained the corner of her mouth. I did not remind her. Instead, I reached out directly and gently wiped the sauce from the corner of her lips with my fingertip. "You eat like a little calico kitten. I can wipe it myself." This warm moment felt like the final calm before the storm. I finished the last sip of milk and buried the darkness from last night's surveillance footage deep within my eyes, no matter how many monsters and demons lurked outside. Inside this home, I wanted to give her nothing but sunlight. After breakfast, Emily and I walked side by side along the tree-lined road to school. It was the height of the morning rush hour. Traffic flowed endlessly along the road. Students in uniform and office workers in a hurry. All rushed forward. But the moment we crossed an intersection with a traffic light, that familiar nauseating sensation, like a venomous snake flicking its tongue as it watched us, once again sank its fangs into the back of my neck. Every muscle in my body instantly tightened. The feeling was unmistakable. Somewhere among the crowd moving around us, a pair of extremely cold eyes was staring at Emily's back and mine. "Emily, it looks like your backpack strap came loose. Let me adjust it for you." While helping her fix the strap, my gaze swept around like radar, rapidly scanning the reflection in the mirror of the newsstand at the corner, the blind spot behind the bus stop sign. and even the windows of the cars parked across the street. There were too many people here, and countless overlapping gazes. I could not, immediately, drag the rat hiding in the darkness into the open, but I knew he was nearby. Thanks, Ethan. It feels much more comfortable now. Let's go, class is about to start. With the sensation of being watched following us the entire way, we, finally, entered the classroom filled with the sound of morning reading. I told Emily to return to her seat first, while I remained by the back door of the classroom, my gaze as sharp as a blade, immediately locked onto the last row, where one seat always seemed to shrink into the shadows. My heart suddenly sank. That seat was empty. The desk was so clean that there was not even a single book on it. Ethan, what are you looking at? Oh, are you asking about Dylan, that quiet guy? He didn't come today. I heard he called our homeroom teacher early this morning to take sick leave. He said his fever was so high that he couldn't get out of bed. Ryan's casual remark sent a violent storm raging through my mind. You said he took the day off and didn't come. Yeah, that's right, Ethan. Why are you reacting so strongly? He gets beaten up every few days. Isn't it normal for him to miss school? I released Ryan and slowly returned to my seat. A layer of cold sweat had already formed on my palms. At 1 a.m, Dylan had appeared outside my window like a ghost, conducting an extremely professional stealth reconnaissance. This morning, on our way to school, we once again felt an intensely hostile gaze, following us like a shadow. And now he just happened to have a high fever and miss school. Every clue collided at this moment in the most terrifying way possible. If he was not at school, then where was he now? The answer had nearly revealed itself. The person staring at us on the road this morning, who was now hiding in the darkness, following us like a venomous snake, was, without a doubt, Dylan, the unidentified killer from my previous life who had stolen the fruit knife that Emily carried for protection on the stormy night. The person who crept outside my window last night, and the twisted stalker who followed us this morning, in my deduction, had finally merged into a single face. A pale and timid face hidden beneath thick hair. Dylan's face. In Dylan's face! What secret were you hiding? The dismissal bell had barely rung. GL? When I took Emily to Dylan's home address listed in the class directory. It was a very ordinary residential neighborhood. Although it had been built many years ago, the surroundings were still relatively clean. After reaching the 3rd floor, I knocked on the security door but received no response. Just as I began to grow suspicious, a middle-aged woman living across the hall stepped outside carrying a bag of trash. Stop knocking. Are you looking for Dylan's family? Before dawn this morning, they packed up all their belongings and moved away. I heard something urgent happened with their relatives back home, so they even gave up the apartment. You said they moved before dawn. That's right, a little after 5. The moving company's truck made a huge commotion. I was annoyed because it was so noisy. A thunderous boom echoed inside my head. The woman's words were like a bucket of ice water, pouring straight over me from head to toe. They had moved before dawn. Then this morning, on the way to school with Emily, that intensely cold gaze had followed us like a shadow. Who had it belonged to? My mind raced. Cold sweat instantly covered my back. If the person following us this morning had not been Dylan at all, then that proved. Besides Dylan, who had crept outside my window last night, there was another pair of eyes in broad daylight, watching me closely. Was it the unfamiliar overweight man who had appeared during the day, the fugitive serial killer, or the true murderer from the stormy night in my previous life? I suppressed the shock and uneasiness inside me and took Emily's hand, deciding to bring her home before thinking through everything else. But when we returned to my front door, we found an uninvited guest standing in the hallway. He was a middle-aged man wearing an expensive, tailored suit. His hair was immaculately styled without a single strand out of place. His brows were tightly furrowed, and he paced back and forth with a deathly pale face. His entire body radiated the authority of a powerful man and barely restrained fury. When she saw the visitor's face clearly, Emily instantly stiffened beside me. She instinctively tightened her grip on my hand and softly called Dad. So you still remember that I'm your dad? Mr. Carter strode toward us and pulled Emily away from my side with one hand. Emily, do you have any idea what you're doing? Your mother is still lying in the hospital, so sick that she is barely conscious, yet you heartlessly abandoned her. That isn't all. You're a young woman. Yet at your age, you followed a male student and moved in with him. What do you think your reputation is worth? Faced with her biological father's relentless scolding, Emily's eyes immediately turned red. But this time she did not back down. Instead, she forcefully pulled free from Mr. Carter's grip. What right do you have to lecture me? You were the one who abandoned my mother first. If it weren't for you, she never would have become the way she is now. What could a child like you understand about adult matters? Haven't I given you and your mother enough support every month? Now your mother is sick and you have run away. Pack your things and come home with me immediately. I will not allow my daughter to live so recklessly outside. I'm not going. I don't want anything to do with you. And I certainly don't want to set foot inside your house. I'll find a way to deal with Mom's illness myself. I don't need you interfering. Mr. Carter angrily reached out, trying to forcibly grab Emily's arm. I stepped forward immediately, like a solid wall, firmly shielding Emily behind me. I coldly met Mr. Carter's gaze. Mr. Carter, Emily has made herself perfectly clear. She does not want to go with you. Forcing her like this would hardly look respectable. Ethan, you don't think that just because your family has some influence in Riverton, you can seduce my daughter. This is a private family matter. He looked at Emily, who was firmly protected behind me. Then, at the cold warning in my eyes, after weighing his options, he had no choice but to suppress the urge to take her by force. Ethan, listen carefully. If you ever make her suffer even the slightest grievance, even if my entire family has to risk everything, we will never let you get away with it. After saying that, Mr. Carter viciously glared at Emily, then, accompanied by the heavy sound of his leather shoes, Mr. Carter left with a stomach full of anger and helplessness. He turned sharply and stormed away, disappearing at the end of the hallway. Watching Mr. Carter vanish beyond the stairwell, I took Emily's hand and led her back inside, then locked the security door from within. Emily was still feeling somewhat down. She silently entered the kitchen to pour herself some water, while I sat down on the sofa, my brows furrowing more deeply by the second. Mr. Carter's devastated expression just now, along with his posture as an aging father prepared to die protecting his daughter, created a feeling inside me that something was terribly wrong. No. Back then, he had been heartless enough to abandon his wife and daughter without checking on them for more than 10 years. He had never appeared even after Mrs. Carter lost her mind. So why had he suddenly come to my front door today, pretending to care so deeply whether his daughter lived or died? I suppressed the doubts in my heart and casually turned on the computer monitor connected to the surveillance cameras. The instant the image lit up, my pupils suddenly contracted. It was that overweight man, the same person who had appeared on the surveillance footage last night. The slightly heavy man with drooping eyes had appeared again, beside the flower bed below my apartment. He was hiding behind a utility pole, secretly peeking out and staring at my window. You ignored the road to heaven and delivered yourself straight to my door instead. Today I was going to skin you alive. I immediately took out my phone and called Ryan. His home was not far from here. Ryan brought his gear to the street below my apartment. I got a tail watching me, so we'll surround him from both sides. Don't let him escape. 5 minutes later, Ryan arrived at the opposite end of the alley, panting heavily. I signaled to him. The two of us moved like a pair of pincers, charging at the overweight man from the left and right. Holy shit! Just as he tried to run, Ryan completely blocked his escape route. I rushed up from behind and kicked him hard behind the knee. The man screamed and collapsed onto his knees. I twisted his arm behind his back and slammed his face against the rough wall. You've been watching us for 2 days, so start talking. Who sent you? Please, man, spare me. My arm is breaking. I didn't do anything. You didn't do anything. Then why have you been lurking around here? Tell the truth, or I'll smash every tooth in your mouth today. I'll talk. 3 days ago, a woman wearing a mask came looking for me. What did she tell you to do? Murder or kidnapping? Were you also the one following us on the road this morning? No way, man. I would never dare do anything illegal like that. The client only sent me photos and your address. She told me to watch every day and record what time you left, what time you came home, and whether any other adults lived inside. I swear, I absolutely never followed you on the street. I was only responsible for sitting outside the entrance to this apartment complex and recording the times. What did she look like? I honestly don't know who she was. After paying me, she never appeared again, and she didn't leave any contact information. Man, I was only trying to make a living. I'll return every cent of the deposit. Please let me go. I stared into the overweight man's eyes. My 10 years of criminal investigation experience told me he was not lying. He truly was just a desperate nobody being used by someone else. The trail leading to the stalker had been completely severed again. I released him, and the overweight man scrambled and rolled his way out of the alley. Ryan stood beside me, still cursing nonstop, while I felt more frustrated and exhausted than ever before. The person who had followed us like a shadow on the road this morning was not this overweight man, nor was it Dylan who had moved away overnight. The true culprit still remained like an invisible ghost, hiding without revealing even the slightest flaw. And whoever had hired the overweight man only wanted to learn our daily routine. That proved the other party was planning an extremely meticulous operation. After sending Ryan home, I returned to the apartment alone. Emily was already asleep. I collapsed wearily onto the sofa and rubbed my aching temples. I raised my head and looked at the surveillance feeds on the wall showing the first floor, the entrances, and the area outside the windows. The main road to the apartment complex, everything looked normal. Wait, my gaze suddenly locked onto monitor number 2. It was the infrared camera mounted diagonally above the front door to monitor the hallway's blind spot. When I had personally installed and adjusted it yesterday, in the lower right corner of the image, it had clearly captured the red color of the metal cabinet containing the fire hose. But now the camera had shifted roughly 15 degrees to the left. The fire cabinet had completely disappeared from the frame. In its place was an enormous blind spot beside the doorframe. The blood in my veins instantly froze. Someone had tampered with my camera. There was no way the wind could have moved it because the camera had been firmly bolted to the wall. Ryan and I had just gone downstairs to catch that overweight man, and had only been gone for about 10 minutes. Yet within those brief 10 minutes, someone had silently crept up to my front door, professionally avoiding the camera's direct line of sight and forcibly twisting it to a different angle, deliberately creating a surveillance blind spot. The real demon crawling through the darkness had been standing right outside my door moments ago. I sat alone on the living room sofa, staring at the camera on the monitor that had been twisted aside, creating a blind spot. My mind rapidly reorganized everything that had happened today. The unfamiliar overweight man who appeared during the day, the dusty handprint outside the second-floor window, the shadow that appeared furtively in the middle of the night, and the person who had just secretly moved the camera. When I connected all these actions together, the person I suspected most was still Dylan because of the enormous contrast in his behavior. Just as I frowned and considered his motive, bang, 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 someone suddenly pounded on the security door. I opened it cautiously. The person standing outside was unexpectedly Ryan, who had only left a short while ago. Why did you come back? Ethan, I forgot something just now. Dylan asked me this morning to return 2 things to you. Clear. What are they? He told me to give these 2 items back to you, and specifically asked me to pass along a message. He said he actually came to your place last night because he wanted to return them personally and thank you for always helping him. But it was already too late. He didn't want to disturb the 2 of you while you were resting. So he stood outside for a while and then left. After hearing Ryan's explanation, a loud buzzing filled my head. Dylan had appeared outside my window at 1 in the morning, simply because he wanted to return something. And it was also true that his entire family had moved away. He had never followed me on the road, and had no time to come back and tamper with my camera. Every suspicion surrounding Dylan was completely eliminated at that moment. My only lead had been severed once again. I leaned back against the sofa in frustration, overwhelmed by confusion and disappointment. If it wasn't Dylan, then who had moved the camera? Who else was secretly watching me? Just as I reached a complete dead end, Ryan suddenly took out his phone, opened a photo, and held it in front of me. "Oh, right, Ethan. I've been meaning to ask you something. The man in this photo, was he secretly hired by your family to act as your bodyguard? I've noticed him constantly appearing near you when I helped you catch that overweight guy in the alley earlier. I saw him lingering outside the apartment complex again. I abruptly raised my head and took the phone. The photo had been secretly taken on a dark street corner. It showed a man wearing a baseball cap. Only the side of his back could be seen clearly. I stared at the figure in the photo on Ryan's phone. Without the slightest hesitation, I immediately took out my own phone, photographed the image, and sent it directly to my mom. Then I immediately called her Mom. The man in this photo, was he arranged by you and Dad? The other end remained silent for 2 seconds. Then my mom's astonished voice came through Ethan. I can't believe you actually noticed him. He is a retired mercenary your dad paid a fortune to hire. You're living alone outside the family home, and your dad and I were genuinely worried. So we specifically hired him to secretly protect you. He has been watching over you for a while now. I never expected you to discover him. When I heard the words, retired mercenary, my tightly wound nerves suddenly twitched. He is only responsible for checking whether there are any dangers around you. He won't monitor your private life. If his presence makes you uncomfortable, your dad and I can tell him to withdraw. There's no need. It's just that recently outside the guest room window where Emily stays, I found some unusual footprints. So I thought there might be danger. But if he is only responsible for protecting me, why did he go to the guest room window? Didn't you tell me before that Emily would be staying in our guest room? I thought I should ask him to check whether the guest room window was secure and whether the security bars were safe. Mom, send me his contact information after we hang up. Very soon, a phone number appeared on my screen. Holy shit, so he really is a bodyguard hired by your family, and a retired mercenary at that. Ethan, your family's security arrangements are seriously ridiculous. I ignored Ryan's exclamation and stared only at the string of numbers on the screen, my mind working rapidly. A retired mercenary, if that was the case. Then every seemingly irrational event now had the most reasonable explanation. The dusty handprint outside the window and the camera that had just been repositioned could both have been left by this mercenary while inspecting the surrounding area for security risks, or perhaps while deliberately avoiding my counter-surveillance equipment. He had accidentally left behind traces. At that moment, all the clues seemed to form a complete circle again. The traces that had seemed ready to lead me to the killer now appeared to have vanished completely. I had to contact this mercenary immediately and confirm whether the handprint on the window and the moved camera had truly been his doing. I took a deep breath and called the number my mom had just sent. The phone rang only once before someone answered. Hello, young master, is this Uncle Jack you're speaking to? The handprint on the guest room window and the camera outside the front door being repositioned, were those your doing? Ha ha ha, young master. Your counter-surveillance skills are truly remarkable. Your level of vigilance is even better than that of several recruits I once trained. While inspecting the surrounding area for security risks this afternoon, I discovered that every screw securing the guest room window bars had rusted. They were so loose that they could be pulled out with only a little force. So I went ahead and replaced them all with high-strength titanium alloy screws, then deliberately aged their appearance and scattered some dust over them. I didn't expect the dust on my gloves leave a print on the glass. As for the camera outside your door, the original angle was sufficient for deterring burglars. But if it was meant to guard against a skilled intruder, there was still a blind spot lasting approximately 1 second. So I adjusted it for you. Alright, I understand. Uncle Jack, thank you for your hard work after ending the call. I quietly stepped into the guest room. Emily was sleeping deeply, her breathing steady and even. I walked over to the window, using the faint light from outside. I carefully inspect the edges of the security bars. Sure enough, the screws that appeared completely covered in rust had all been replaced with extremely strong new materials. Their surfaces had simply been disguised with incredible skill. I released a long breath of relief. There was no deranged stalker and no professional assassin. All those terrifying incidents that had felt like encounters with ghosts had merely been caused by my family's elite bodyguard, eliminating potential security risks. But the moment the last of my tension disappeared, it was immediately replaced by overwhelming exhaustion and a sense of confusion powerful enough to drown me. I collapsed onto the living room sofa and stared at the empty room. The lead involving the overweight man working for money had been severed. Dylan had moved away, and his name had been completely cleared. Mr. Wilson had a flawless alibi. The fugitive serial killer was also unrelated to the murder in my previous life. Every clue had reached a dead end. The true murderer from that stormy night, who had brutally snatched away the knife Emily carried for protection and stabbed her to death, still remained like a faceless ghost, perfectly hidden within the endless sea of people. The helpless feeling of throwing a punch into cotton, combined with 2 continuous days of extreme tension and pressure, along with the cold that had seeped into my body after last night's rain, finally and completely overwhelmed my body at that moment. My vision began to blur. Everything around me started spinning. Violent waves of nausea churned through my stomach. My throat felt dry and scorched as though it were burning. I struggled to stand and pour myself a glass of water, but my legs suddenly gave out, and my entire body collapsed heavily onto the sofa. As I completely lost consciousness, felt as though I had fallen into a blazing sea of fire. The bloody, stormy night from my previous life, and Emily's deathly pale face, kept intertwining and tearing through my dreams. Ethan, wake up through the haze. A gentle voice kept calling anxiously beside my ear. A sudden, icy sensation spread across my forehead, cool and soothing, temporarily suppressing the flames raging through my body. I struggled to open my heavy eyelids. When my vision finally came into focus, I saw Emily's delicate face filled with worry and even a trace of pallor. Ethan, you're finally awake. You scared me to death. How did your fever get this high? I parted my lips, but discovered that my throat was too hoarse to make a sound. I tried to sit up, only to realize I was lying on the bed in the master bedroom, covered by a thick blanket, with a cold towel resting on my forehead. I'm fine. I probably just caught a slight chill last night. A slight chill. Your temperature was 103.6 degrees. When I woke up this morning, I found you collapsed on the sofa. You wouldn't wake up no matter how much I called you. Your body was terrifyingly hot. Drink some water to soothe your throat first. I already asked our homeroom teacher for leave on your behalf. We're staying home to rest today. The warm water flowed down my parched throat, bringing me a little vitality. I watched her rush busily back and forth, her eyes covered in red veins. Clearly, ever since she discovered my fever, she had been keeping watch beside my bed. Without leaving for even a moment, take your fever medicine. She placed the medicine into my mouth. If your fever still hasn't gone down by this afternoon, we're going to the hospital for an IV. Then, she tightly clasped my hand with both of hers. Ethan, don't be afraid. Although I don't know what you've been so worried about, it's my turn to take care of you now. Just get a good sleep. I won't go anywhere. I'll stay right here and watch over you. Looking into her determined eyes and feeling the warmth in her palms, the nerves that had been stretched almost to the breaking point finally relaxed for the first time at that moment. Under the effects of the medicine and fever, I closed my eyes again and sank into a deep sleep. In my dream, I suddenly returned to my previous life. A colleague greeted me enthusiastically. Ethan, there's been a breakthrough in the case you always cared about. We caught the murderer, and it was even someone you knew. Come take a look. I hurriedly asked who it was. A flash of white light appeared, and I suddenly woke up. When I awakened again, the sky outside had already grown dark. The sunset streamed through a gap in the curtains, casting a warm orange-red streak across the bedsheets. The aching throughout my body had eased considerably, and the heat on my forehead had subsided. I gently turned my head and immediately saw Emily lying beside the edge of the bed, fast asleep. She seemed to have reached the limit of exhaustion. Faint, dark circles had formed beneath her eyes. In her hand, she was still tightly gripping the cold towel she had used to cool me down. As though sensing the change in my breathing, she immediately jolted awake like a startled fawn. Thank goodness your fever finally went down. Ethan, are you hungry? I've kept some plain oatmeal warm in the pot. I'll bring you some. Don't rush, stay with me for a little while. I held her hand tightly, feeling the genuine warmth flowing from her palm, almost greedily sensing the pulse beating beneath her wrist, looking at her alive and beautiful before me. An intense feeling of terror, unlike anything I had ever experienced, suddenly coiled around my heart like a venomous snake. This was the first time since being reborn that I had felt such fear. I was afraid all of this was only a long dream, afraid that once I dragged the true murderer into the light, completely changed her fatal ending and brought the entire matter to a close. This rebirth that had broken the laws of time would end. Would I suddenly be dragged back into that cold timeline, where only her gravestone remained? A selfish desire grew inside me, for time to remain frozen at this moment forever. As long as I stopped investigating, as long as I hid her inside this safe apartment, protected by this tightly secured surveillance system, could the two of us forever continue living peacefully like this. But when I saw the unconditional trust she placed in me, I suddenly clenched my teeth. Ethan, what's wrong? Are you feeling dizzy again? I'm fine. My head just feels a little clearer now. I'm getting hungry. All right, then stay leaning here and don't move. I'll bring the oatmeal in. You still need to have your temperature checked after eating. I watched Emily obediently leave the bedroom. Closing the door behind her, the gentleness on my face instantly disappeared, replaced by absolute coldness and determination. I tightly gripped the phone in my hand, my knuckles turning white from the force. A thought suddenly flashed in my mind like lightning. Uncle Jack, the retired mercenary. If my mom had said that Uncle Jack had been secretly protecting me for some time, then on that stormy night last Friday, he must also have been somewhere near me. That night, Emily came through the pouring rain and knocked on my door, then died in that dark alley, in this life. Although she happened to take refuge inside my home, the demon hiding in the darkness, who had originally intended to brutally attack her, might have been following her the entire time. Could he have followed Emily all the way, even reaching the area beneath my apartment that night? If that was true, then Uncle Jack, who had been secretly protecting me, with eyes honed through countless life and death situations, would definitely have noticed the person constantly following behind Emily. Without the slightest hesitation, I quickly found the unsafe phone number and pressed call before the phone had even completed half a ring. The other side answered immediately. Uncle Jack, it's me, young master. Are you feeling better? Is there something you need me to do? Uncle Jack, it was raining heavily last Friday night at around 9:30. A girl completely soaked by the rain came and knocked on my door. You were keeping watch around my apartment at the time, is that right? I was on the rooftop of the building across the street, checking the blind spots in my field of vision. I saw that girl come and knock on your door. Then did you notice whether there was anyone suspicious behind her, or whether someone had followed her all the way to the area near my apartment, and even stood in the darkness watching her after I asked that question? The air around me seemed to freeze. The other end of the call fell silent for a moment, leaving only the faint sound of static constantly scraping against my eardrums. The static lasted only 2 seconds, before Uncle Jack's deep voice came through. Young master, there really was someone. It felt as though a heavy hammer had struck my heart. The blood in my veins instantly began to boil. The rain was extremely heavy that night. That person wore a long black raincoat and also had a mask covering his face. He maintained a distance of about 50 yards the entire way, following the girl neither too closely nor too far behind, until he saw her enter your building. That person stood beneath the streetlight across the road for about 2 or 3 minutes, then turned and left. From that moment onward, he never appeared again. In my previous life, Emily had not entered my home, which was why this demon had found an opportunity to attack her in the alley. But in this life, Emily had taken refuge inside my apartment, completely escaping the murderer's hunting range. Therefore, all he could do was watch helplessly as his prey escaped through the rain, and give up in frustration. Uncle Jack, did you see his face clearly at the time? Can you investigate who that person really was? The rain was too heavy, and the streetlights were dim. That person had covered his entire body. There was truly no way to see his face clearly. But although I did not pursue him at the time, I still clearly remember which alley he turned into when he left. Young master, as long as he passed through there, he must have left behind traces. Uncle Jack, I want to find out who he is. After ending the call, I took a deep breath and concealed all the murderous intent surging in my eyes. Just then, the bedroom door was gently pushed open. Ethan, the oatmeal is ready. It's just the right temperature. Looking at her gentle and peaceful appearance in her apron, the agitation inside me from gradually approaching the truth was immediately soothed. The doctor said your stomach would be weak after your fever went down. Eat something light to settle it first. You've been watching over me this whole time, so have you eaten yet? I already had a small bowl in the kitchen. Hurry and eat. Stop talking. This patient doesn't have enough strength to raise his arms, so I'll have to trouble Ms. Babysitter to feed me one spoonful at a time. Emily glared at me reproachfully. Inside this bedroom bathed in warm light, the schemes and murderous intent outside the window seemed to be completely shut away. Early the next morning, I watched Emily leave for school, while instructing Uncle Jack to secretly escort her. When the security door closed, and I confirmed that Emily had gone far enough, the gentleness in my eyes completely vanished. I quickly changed into black clothing, put on a baseball cap, and walked out the door. Half an hour later, I met Uncle Jack in an alley behind an internet cafe near the crime scene. The two of us met up. Young master, this is all the privately owned surveillance footage from around that area last Friday night. I spent the entire night copying everything. Thank you for your hard work, Uncle Jack. Uncle Jack and I stared at the computer screen, although the footage was somewhat blurry because of the heavy rain. When that person passed beneath the streetlight, the outline of his body still became visible. Looking at the height and proportions of the person on the screen, along with his gait, I quickly recalled everyone I had encountered. Very soon, a name leaped from my memory. Mason, there could be no mistake. That height and build definitely belonged to him. Mason was the biological younger brother of Vanessa Emily's stepmother. At dusk, the sound of a key turning came from the security door. Emily walked inside wearing her backpack. The moment she saw me sitting on the sofa, she immediately hurried over. Ethan, are you feeling better? Is your head still dizzy? I recovered a long time ago. The fever is completely gone. You don't need to worry. That's good. I felt uneasy all day at school. I was afraid no one would be here to care for you while you were home alone. We sat together on the sofa for a while, enjoying the silence. Then I put away my smile and looked into her eyes. Emily, I need to go out and handle something next. It may take about 2 days. You have to leave for 2 days. You only just recovered. I'll be fine. There's a personal matter I have to handle. I'll be back soon. Stay home and wait for me during these 2 days. You're not allowed to go anywhere, okay? I'll stay home and wait for you. But you have to be careful while you're outside. I will at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. Thick, dark clouds covered the sky outside the window. Before long, torrential rain began pouring down. Emily was afraid of stormy days. At that moment, she was curled up on the sofa, wrapped tightly in a thin blanket. Meanwhile, I was deep inside an abandoned building in Brookhaven. I wore a mask and a voice changer, standing before a blindfolded young man, whose hands were tied behind his back. His name was Mason, the target I had secretly investigated over the past few days. He had a habit of jogging every morning. I used the opportunity to abduct him and bring him to this abandoned building. In my previous life as a homicide detective, I had been required to obey the law. But now, to quickly uncover the truth from back then, I had no choice but to use a few special methods. Who are you? My family doesn't have any money. Please, let me go. I swear I won't call the police. If I were doing this for money, what use would kidnapping you be? Now I ask the questions, and you answer. The fact that I could easily bring you here proves that I already know everything about you. Don't try anything. I took an ice-cold glass bottle and gently pressed it against his neck. Trapped in darkness and terror, he immediately began trembling violently. Ask me anything. I'll tell you everything I know. Think carefully. What did you do on that stormy Friday night 2 weeks ago? What exactly were you doing? I deliberately avoided giving him a specific time to increase the psychological pressure on him. Sure enough, he frantically searched his memory and stammered that he had invited a girl named Chloe to his house to study together. Until that evening, if I drip a few drops of this onto your face, I'm sure you'll look extremely distinctive afterward. Don't, I'll talk. I stood up my classmate that afternoon, but I did go out that evening. What did you go out to do? To follow a girl. You abandoned a female classmate inside your home and went out in the pouring rain to follow another girl. Give me one reason to believe you. It's true, my sister told me to do it. Mason's older sister. Was Vanessa the current wife of Emily's biological father, Mr. Carter? I immediately used his fingerprint to unlock his phone and searched through the messages from that day. Sure enough, everything had been recorded clearly. Vanessa had told Mason and to abandon the female classmate inside his home and immediately go downstairs, wait for Emily to leave their house and then follow her. I had never understood before. why Mason would invite a girl to his home, only to go out into the rain. Such stalking behavior had been extremely abnormal. Now everything made sense. According to the messages, Mason had followed Emily all the way to my apartment building. After learning that Emily had entered a male student's home, Vanessa told him to wait a few more minutes and return once he saw that Emily was not coming back out. In other words, on the stormy night in my previous life, Mason's pursuit had completely ended the moment Emily knocked on my door. He had not continued following her. But if Mason had only been responsible for following her and had never killed anyone, then how exactly had Emily been murdered in my previous life? Combining this with the autopsy report from my previous life, Emily's clothing had been disheveled, but there had been no obvious signs of a struggle on her body, nor any strangulation marks or signs that she had been restrained. That proved she had not stopped resisting because she was being assaulted. The murder weapon was the fruit knife Emily had brought for protection. The only possibility was that Vanessa had gone to find Emily afterward, and the two of them had argued. Given Vanessa's extreme desire for control and her hostility toward her husband's daughter from his previous marriage, their conversation had most likely broken down, ultimately resulting in a murder committed in a moment of rage. Having deduced this far, although I still lacked decisive direct evidence, the outline of the truth had nearly become clear. At the very least, the lead involving Mason had reached its conclusion. Get out and don't look back. Otherwise, you know what will happen. Mason reacted as though he had been granted a pardon, scrambling and stumbling out of the abandoned building. I climbed alone to the top floor of the building, letting the freezing rain pour over me. The cold water quickly cleared my mind. There were two reasons I had been reborn. The first was to find the true murderer. The second was to protect Emily from ever being hurt again. Emily was now living safely inside my home. As long as I kept her from meeting Vanessa in the future, the hidden danger would no longer exist. As for the murderer, my target had already been narrowed down to Vanessa, but I still lacked direct evidence. Judging by the outcome, I had successfully changed Emily's fate. But what if the murderer was someone else? At that exact moment, a deafening clap of thunder tore across the sky. Lightning instantly illuminated the entire scene. Then my vision suddenly went dark. A series of strange images began appearing like a film reel. When I recovered my senses, I discovered that Emily had somehow appeared beside me. No, she was not standing, but floating. I'm dreaming again. I stared at the scene in shock. Emily, at that moment, looked exactly like the version of her I had seen in my dreams. Back when I was a homicide detective in my previous life, a faint, almost imperceptible smile always lingered on her lips. Yet her face carried an expression of heartache for me. She simply watched me in silence, without saying a word. Seeing the familiar Emily appear before me, I nearly thought I had traveled back again. I immediately looked around and realized I had not returned to the rooftop of the police station but had appeared outside my apartment door, just as I was still shocked and uncertain. A girl soaked from head to toe slowly walked toward me. Yeah! Raindrops slid from the ends of her hair into her collar. She wrapped both arms around herself and slowly walked all the way to my front door. I was standing right beside her and was shocked to discover that this Emily from the past could not see me at all. I turned my head in confusion and looked at the ghost-like Emily floating beside me. She still glanced at me without expression, then shifted her gaze back to her past self. Seeing this, I turned around again and looked at Emily drenched in rain before me. She stood outside the door but did not immediately ring the bell. Bit her lip, as though hesitating over something. Only after a long while did she slowly reach out, but stopped just before touching the doorbell. After hesitating once more and taking a deep breath, she finally gathered the courage to press it. When the chime rang, her body suddenly trembled violently. She hurriedly pulled her hand back and wrapped her arms around herself again, looking both embarrassed and uneasy. Before long, the apartment door opened. The person who answered was my past self. This was the first time I had ever seen my former self from a third-person perspective. At that moment, I did not know whether I was dreaming or something else. In any case, I was standing right beside them, yet neither my past self nor Emily could see me. I did not think too deeply about it, and simply watched everything unfold in silence. Exactly as I remembered. Emily asked if she could stay for the night. But I had been too young back then, and was afraid my parents would find out and scold me. I did not dare casually let a girl whose upper body had become almost transparent from the rain stay in my home. I thought she was in trouble and had no money to get home. So I offered to take her back, then turned around to get a raincoat and umbrella. But the moment I turned my back, Emily struggled with herself for a moment, then sadly turned and left. Seeing this, I ignored my past self searching inside the apartment for the umbrella and immediately chased after her, because I knew perfectly well what I had been doing at the time. But I had no idea what Emily experienced that night. After being turned away from my door, even though this was only a dream, I still wanted to see what it would reveal about everything she encountered that night. I caught up with Emily and saw a girl filled with confusion who had no idea where she should go. She did not want me to know about the difficulties in her family, so she did not dare let me take her home. But after refusing my kindness, where else could she go? The world was vast, yet there was nowhere she belonged. Her mother, her dad, and me, the three places she had considered home, no longer seemed to have room for her. She wandered absent-mindedly to a convenience store. When her stomach suddenly growled, she remembered that she had not eaten anything since noon. She took out the last of the money she had and bought a piece of bread and a cup of milk for dinner. The convenience store clerk saw how miserably soaked she was and immediately brought her a towel to dry herself. Before Emily left, the clerk even warmly pressed an umbrella into her hands. "Just return it to me the next time you come by. The rain is too heavy. A girl shouldn't stay soaked for too long. It's bad for your health," Emily tried to refuse. But, faced with the clerk's kindness, she could only thank her and accept it. She opened the umbrella and prepared to leave, only to unexpectedly notice a familiar figure. She looked in that direction and saw Dylan being surrounded and beaten by 3 thugs in a corner. After struggling with herself for a while, she finally gathered her courage and walked over. "Stop right now. If you keep bullying him, I'll call the police." She frantically reached for her phone, only then remembering that her mother had smashed it before she left home. Seeing her search through her empty pockets, "Looks like the pretty girl forgot to bring her phone when she went out. If you want us to stop bullying him, that's fine. Then you can stay with us." The moment the 3 of them approached Emily, Dylan, who had been silently taking the beating without speaking or fighting back, suddenly struggled to his feet and desperately placed himself in front of Emily. "This has nothing to do with her. You need to leave now." "It's too late to leave now. Stop her." Seeing 2 of them rush forward to grab Emily, Dylan, who had always endured everything in silence, suddenly berserk. Someone who constantly shouts and loses his temper is not truly frightening. But when an honest, quiet person is pushed into a corner, they can become terrifying once they lose control. Dylan charged at the 3 of them like a rabid dog, ignoring the punches and kicks raining down on him. He used every part of his body capable of attacking to fight back. Dylan sank his teeth hard into one thug's arm, making him grimace and bare his teeth in agony. Immediately afterward, Dylan targeted the boy beside him and opened his mouth, biting down tightly and refusing to let go. No matter how they struck him, he would not release his bite. He nearly tore a chunk of flesh straight from the boy's arm. Only when the boy fell to his knees and begged in pain did Dylan finally let go. Seeing how badly his 2 friends had been bitten, the blonde thug became frightened as well, stunned by someone who had no fear of death. They never expected this kid to be a complete lunatic. The 3 could only shout a few threats before fleeing in panic. I knew those 3 were carrying knives, but they had only intended to frighten him. They did not actually have the nerve to stab anyone. Dylan's recklessness had completely terrified them. Only then did I suddenly understand. The injuries I had seen on Dylan at school in my previous life had indeed all come from protecting Emily. After seeing the 3 of them run away, Dylan exhaustedly let the heavy rain pour over him and collapsed into a muddy puddle. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, thank you. We're classmates, so there's no need to thank me. He protected me just now, too. So let's say neither of us owes the other anything." Emily forced a gentle smile and reached out to help him. Dylan looked at the hand she offered, did not take it because his own hands were covered in mud. Instead, he pushed himself up from the ground. He walked to the trash can and retrieved the backpack that had been knocked away. then opened an inner compartment and confirmed that the clean handkerchief was still there. Only then did he relax. Your umbrella is broken. Mine. But this umbrella belongs to the convenience store over there. Remember to return it after you're done. If I take this umbrella, then what about you? I'll be fine. I want to stand in the rain for a while. So I don't need an umbrella. Dylan had always been perceptive and quickly noticed that something was wrong with her. Did something happen to you? It's nothing. Just a family matter, since it concerned her family. Dylan did not feel comfortable asking further. But how could he shamelessly take an umbrella from a girl and leave her standing in the rain? Just as he was still hesitating, Emily shoved the umbrella directly into his hand. Immediately afterward, she rushed into the dark rain that was as thick as fog. Before long, her figure could no longer be seen clearly. Left with no other choice, Dylan could only carry the umbrella home. Only then did I finally understand why there had been no convenience store umbrella. At the crime scene, Emily had given it to Dylan amid the rain. Besides Emily blindly walking ahead, I saw another figure, and it was Mason. He was doing everything possible to avoid the nearby cameras, weaving through the rain as he secretly followed Emily. Because I had already interrogated Mason and knew he was only following Emily, I was not surprised. What intrigued me most now was what had happened at the crime scene. What exactly had taken place there? I turned my head and looked at the ghost-like Emily still floating silently beside me, then followed closely behind with her. Past Emily walked like a soulless corpse, continuing forward without stopping. The freezing rain soaked her entire body, but she seemed to have lost all sensation. She had no destination and no idea where she should go. At some point, she had wandered into an old neighborhood without any effective surveillance cameras. Finally, she numbly stopped beneath an abandoned rain shelter, staring at the torrential rain before her. In silent bewilderment, I stood beside the floating Emily, watching everything unfold from an outsider's perspective. I saw Mason hiding in the darkness, rapidly typing a message on his phone. I did not even need to look to know. He was reporting Emily's movements to Vanessa. It seemed Vanessa would appear soon. My mind had already begun imagining the conflict that was about to unfold. Next, the people who had left traces on that stormy night appeared one after another. I saw Ryan beneath a shelter in a nearby parking lot, peeling an apple. After receiving a phone call, he hurriedly left, casually slipping the knife into his pocket. Sure enough, no second knife had been left at the scene. A homeless man and a delivery worker hurried past. That despicable, perverted neighbor wore a raincoat and secretly slipped into an adult store. He bought several items and quickly left. People came and went nearby, while Emily stood beneath the shelter in a daze, like a statue that had lost its soul. The world was vast, yet she no longer knew where she should go. Since she had nowhere to go, her feet naturally could not carry her any farther. I had no idea how much time passed before a figure in a raincoat appeared nearby. The figure was not tall and was actually rather petite. While Emily was still lost in thought, the figure slowly walked up to her. The faint light was suddenly blocked. Emily immediately raised her head. Sophia's appearance left me completely stunned. I had originally assumed Mason had contacted Vanessa, but I never expected the person who appeared here to be Sophia Emily's paternal half-sister, the daughter born to Mr. Carter and Vanessa. Why was it her? My mind filled with questions. I had never considered the possibility that this young girl would appear at the crime scene, but very quickly, scattered information about her flashed through my mind. Sophia was naturally intelligent. She had skipped grades and achieved exceptional academic results. In other words, she possessed an extremely intelligent and precociously mature mind. I had completely overlooked her before because of her young age, but now it seemed she had most likely impersonated her mother and ordered Mason to carry out the task. But could a young girl like her really have gotten into a conflict with Emily, severe enough to cause a murder? I knew that in your current situation, you would have nowhere left to call home. Emily had never held any malice toward this younger sister, but she knew perfectly well that Sophia had disliked her since childhood. Yet no matter how much she disliked her, it should not have been enough to make her brave a midnight storm to hunt her down. You came out here in the middle of the night. Just to say that, of course not. I came here to make a few things clear. Do not come to my house again. Neither Mom nor I like you. You already have your own mother, so why do you keep trying to steal my dad? Sophia's eyes were filled with resentment far beyond her years. Just to say that, you had to come out into a storm in the middle of the night. Some things need to be said face to face, and something of practical value must be left behind, so you cannot change your mind later. The Pia pulled a waterproof pouch from inside her raincoat. I know you have nowhere to go now. There is $1,000 here for you. Then, sign this agreement severing your relationship with Dad. From now on, we will have nothing to do with each other. I finally understood, after learning that Emily had been driven into a dead end. Sophia wanted to take advantage of her misfortune, using money to force Emily into signing this absurd agreement in exchange for peace in the future. The reason she had Mason follow Emily the entire way was to confirm whether Emily truly had nowhere left to turn. Looking at the agreement Sophia held out, a bitter and desolate smile appeared on Emily's face. She never expected that after she had fallen into such a miserable situation, her own sister would still come to kick her while she was down. Nothing was more painful than a dead heart. At that moment, she no longer cared about the $1,000. She cared only about the small amount of pitiful dignity she had left. I won't sign it. Emily, stop dreaming. Haven't you figured it out yet? Figured out what? Dad does not care about you at all. And he does not love you either. Look at the weather today. The storm is this severe. Yet when you left our house, he did not even say a single word to stop you. Do you know what that means? It means that, in his heart, he does not have a daughter like you at all. Sophia's cold words were like poisoned shards of ice, piercing deeply into Emily's already wounded heart. The words that he had never cared about her had tormented her countless times, like venomous snakes whenever her mother suffered an episode. But now, in the middle of a violent storm, on a street where the entire world seemed to have abandoned her, her own sister, who shared her blood, declared it with the merciless posture of a victor. Without hesitation, Emily felt that deep inside her mind, the single thread that had barely sustained her hope in life had finally snapped. All the despair she had endured before was like a thick fog, instantly swallowing her whole. The coldness of being thrown out by her mother, the numbness of having nowhere to go, and the pain of her father watching indifferently. That was the sound of a heart breaking. In truth, Emily understood all of it. But toward that shattered family, she had always held onto a trace of unwillingness and stubborn hope. What kept driving her to see her dad was the final faint light that refused to go out deep inside her soul. But Sophia's words, along with that glaring agreement severing their relationship, were like a pair of cold hands, ruthlessly pressing that final ray of light deep into the cold and muddy reality. The bitter smile on Emily's face froze. She no longer argued, nor did she explain. Any words at that moment would have sounded pale and ridiculous. She felt something inside her body rapidly turning cold, as though an invisible hand were crushing her heart. A suffocating numbness and chill spread through every limb. The strength supporting her body seemed to drain away in an instant. She raised her head and looked at Sophia's calculating face, which resembled their dad in several ways. Her gaze was terrifyingly empty. Keep your money. I will not sign the agreement. There was no longer any resistance in her voice, only an exhaustion and calmness that reached deep into her bones. What difference did signing or refusing to sign make anymore? The small corner of her heart reserved for her dad had become like the cold rain around her, losing its finite trace of warmth. Her heart had gone completely numb. Emily, stop being so shameless. Seeing that Emily still refused to submit even now, Sophia completely lost her temper. At that exact moment, a cold gleam flashed. Emily pulled from her pocket an icy fruit knife. It was the weapon she had taken from her mother's house for protection. At that moment, Sophia was not the only one frightened. Even Mason, who was hiding in the nearby darkness, gasped sharply in terror. Emily, what are you trying to do? You don't need to be afraid. I will not sign the agreement. If you want me to sever our relationship, then you might as well kill me yourself. Seeing the knife in Emily's hand and hearing her resolute words, Sophia froze. Ha! But to ensure her own safety, she quickly snatched the knife from Emily's hand. At least this way she would hold the advantage, seeing that her sister had taken the knife. Emily closed her eyes and spread her arms wide, as though surrendering herself entirely to Sophia's judgment. But Sophia was only a young girl after all. How could she truly dare to kill someone? After waiting several seconds, and seeing no reaction from Sophia, Emily suddenly gave her a cold smile. If you don't dare do it, then this relationship can never be severed. Do whatever you want. After saying that, Emily turned and walked away. Every extra second she spent beside this younger sister reminded her of her dad's heartlessness. Right now she was merely using the most helpless method she had to provoke this overbearing sister. Sophia gripped the knife tightly and stared at Emily's departing back. Inside her mind, Emily's cold smile before leaving kept replaying. She was leaving. Even though she was nothing but a loser with nowhere to go, what right did she have to laugh at her? What right did she have? An irrational fury erupted inside Sophia. She gripped the knife and hurried after Emily. Before long, the two of them entered a place so dark that even the streetlights could not reach it. Emily, stop right there. Emily completely ignored her, which only made Sophia even angrier. She quickly rushed forward and grabbed Emily's clothes, forcing her to turn around. The violent tug made Emily's soaked shirt immediately become disheveled. Amid the furious black rain, Emily stared expressionlessly at the younger sister raging before her. Suddenly reached out and grabbed Sophia's knife-wielding wrist, then forcefully guided the sharp blade against her own throat. Have you made up your mind? If you have, then do it. The freezing rain struck the back of Sophia's hand and flowed down the blade. Emily's icy fingers forcefully covered Sophia's hand, pressing the sharp blade tightly against her vulnerable carotid artery. Her eyes that had once held countless emotions now contained only deathly silence. They stared emptily through the rain into the void, as though awaiting a final judgment. Stop forcing me. I'm only giving you the choice. If you refuse to choose, then go home. The rain is heavy. Emily's almost caring words sounded like the cruelest mockery to Sophia. What she wanted to see was Emily struggling and submitting, not this calm expression that seemed to look down on her. At that moment, Sophia was driven to the brink of collapse by the immense psychological pressure. The knife in her hand was almost about to fall, when a dark figure suddenly rushed out from the rain shelter hidden in the corner. It was Mason. He had been hiding in the darkness the entire time. Because the light was too dim, he could only vaguely see an icy blade pressed tightly against a throat. He mistakenly believed Emily was the dangerous one, threatening the niece he treasured more than anything. Mason had no time to think carefully. He charged out like a terrified wild dog, rushing forward in a frenzy. His goal was clear: to seize the knife, and pull Sophia away. But he never could have imagined that his sudden collision would become the final straw that broke the camel's back. Sophia was already on the verge of collapse and screamed when the dark figure suddenly lunged at her. She instinctively used all her strength to wrench free from Emily. Meanwhile, the instant the shadow rushed forward, Emily's body instinctively reacted in self-defense, just as Sophia violently pulled her hand away. The road beneath them was also slippery. Emily tried to maintain her balance, and almost instinctively fell toward Sophia. A chain of fatal reactions immediately followed. Sophia frantically pulled away in terror and lost her balance, instinctively drawing both hands inward in an attempt to grab onto something, but one of her hands was still holding the knife. Emily fell forward after losing her balance, while Mason charged toward them in a frenzy, using all his strength to grab the hand holding the knife. The force of all three people instantly collided. That razor-sharp fruit knife, in the darkness, traced an extremely brief arc, with a wet slicing sound. The crisp sound of flesh tearing was swallowed by the heavy rain. Time seemed to freeze. Mason's hand finally closed tightly around Sophia's hand, gripping the knife handle. He breathed a sigh of relief, believing he had succeeded. Sophia's eyes widened, and her body went rigid. While Emily, trapped between the two of them, trembled faintly. She felt a brief flash of icy pain. She lowered her head, as though slightly confused. "Aye!" But the next instant that freezing sensation was replaced by a violent, burning heat that spread wildly from her neck. Warm liquid quickly soaked through her cold, wet clothes. The confusion in her eyes had not yet faded, before it blended with a deeper and more complete sense of relief. She did not let out a single cry of pain. The strength drained from her body like the tide, and she fell limply backward, landing heavily on the cold, waterlogged ground. Water splashed everywhere, mixing with the dark red liquid rapidly spreading outward. Those eyes staring into the endless darkness passed over Mason's horrified, twisted face and Sophia's deathly pale expression. Before finally losing all light, Mason lowered his head in confusion and stared at the knife he had just seized. Bright red blood was running down the blade. He abruptly looked at Emily lying in a pool of blood, and his mind instantly went blank. He did not even know whether his charge had knocked Sophia's hand and caused the blade to slash Emily, or whether before he rushed forward, Emily's throat had already been cut. Overwhelming terror swallowed Mason. Sophia was thinking the same thing. She did not know who should be blamed for that fatal cut. This was the serious crime of murder. She abruptly pulled her hand back, and the blood-stained fruit knife fell into the puddle. She stumbled backward with tears covering her face. Her tears and the rain mingled chaotically, leaving only pure, instinctive terror. Mason stood completely frozen, like a statue being washed by the rain. This had never been his intention. He had only wanted to pull Sophia away, but he had killed someone, while the two of them stood frozen in place. They suddenly heard the footsteps of a passerby. Sophia, who had still been filled with terror moments ago, suddenly turned cold. She bent down and picked up the murder weapon, then dragged Mason away as they fled without looking back. I hesitated in place for an instant, looking at Emily, who had already stopped breathing, lying in the freezing rainwater. My heart hurt so badly that I could not breathe. I wanted to step forward and lift her up, but the ghost-like Emily floating beside me pulled me back. I followed her gaze toward the direction the two of them had fled. I understood what she meant. Right now, I was only an outside observer. I needed to uncover more of the truth. How had these two managed to evade the police? Investigation. I suppressed the pain and chased after Sophia and Mason. They ran to an even more secluded corner. Only then did they stop. What should we do? We're finished this time. Something terrible has happened. What are we going to do if the police question us? Don't panic. The rain is this heavy, and there are no cameras here. We'll be fine. Is the girl you invited over today still at your house? Yes, but I'm not dating her. Then this is simple. Just agree to date her, and have her provide you with an alibi. Even the police would never believe you invited your girlfriend to your house, only to leave her there alone, and go out into the pouring rain, to kill a girl who had absolutely nothing to do with you. Judging from the logic of your actions, your motive for murder, and your opportunity to commit the crime, you meet none of the requirements. But what if the police investigate you thoroughly? You must have left clues along the way. How do you understand even less than your own niece? When the police investigate suspects, they will not choose someone whose likelihood of committing the crime is practically zero, even in the worst-case scenario. Suppose the police discover evidence that you went outside. What about the murder weapon? Emily brought this knife herself. Who could have known she would carry a knife outside? As long as we hold firmly to this inexplicable point about the weapon, the police will not be able to do anything to you. Listening to Sophia's words, I felt a chill run down my spine. This young girl possessed knowledge far beyond her age, along with terrifying composure. Her words quickly calmed the panicking Mason and helped him regain his senses. But what about you? There are cameras in the elevator at your apartment. How will you explain being recorded leaving? I did not take the elevator when I came downstairs. I secretly slipped out without Mom and Dad knowing. So I deliberately took the stairs to avoid the cameras. When I go back, I only need to take the stairs again. The elevator footage will show only that I came home this afternoon. I suddenly understood. No wonder during the investigation in my previous life, there had been no record of anyone from their family going outside. Sophia's deliberate effort to avoid the cameras, in order to hide the truth from her parents, had coincidentally become the key that helped her escape police suspicion. If she had not planned to kill anyone, why would she need to avoid the cameras? But if she had planned the murder, why had the victim brought the murder weapon herself? These two logical contradictions formed a vicious loop. combined with the passerby's statement about an attempted assault, and the fact that the supposed attacker had fled, along with the violent storm that destroyed the crime scene, they completely disrupted the direction of the police investigation. This was the entire truth behind the unsolved case in my previous life. The two people who accidentally caused her death. Both had alibis. Neither had deliberately planned to kill her. Neither had prepared a weapon. The storm, this case filled with countless coincidences, had become an almost unsolvable perfect crime. Watching the two of them disappear into the distance, only desolation remained inside me. Who was the true murderer? Mason or Sophia? There was no answer. But before either of them made a move, Emily had already died inside long ago. What had truly killed her was her shattered family. Her cold and heartless dad, her mother who had lost her mind. Just as I sank into painful self-blame, a small icy hand suddenly, gently caressed my cheek. Feeling the cold touch against my face, I turned my head in a daze and saw the ghost-like Emily floating in midair, looking at me with eyes that were incredibly gentle and filled with compassion. For me, yes, this is far enough, she finally spoke. The familiar voice that had once moved my heart reached my ears again after 10 years as clearly as if she were alive. But her voice carried a heartbreaking sorrow. Am I dreaming right now? Or before I could finish asking, she raised one slender, pale finger and gently placed it against my lips. There is no difference. Everything has already passed. Can this really be considered over? You placed a burden on yourself that you never should have carried, and lived with guilt that never belonged to you. I watched you every day. Watched you torment yourself with this obsession for 10 years. It is time for it to end. You have investigated everything that needed to be investigated. The exact truth no longer matters. Because before that blade ever fell, my heart had already died. My heart trembled, and I finally understood how she had felt at the time. Nothing hurts more than a heart that has already died, when the entire world had abandoned her. Whether her body remained alive no longer mattered to her. That knife wound at the time had even been a form of release. He simply never imagined that because I had failed to make her stay, I would turn that tragedy into shackles that imprisoned me for 10 years, locking myself inside guilt and regret. When you let go, I can finally leave in peace. This guilt should never have been placed on you, and you should not continue carrying it. Treasure the present. She is still waiting for you to come home. Do not become so consumed by an obsession with the past that you forget the person before you who deserves to be cherished most. Hearing those words, my entire body trembled. She was right. I had been living inside my obsession with the past, for the sake of uncovering the truth. I had even been willing to walk along the edge of the law. If I continued like this, I would truly fall into an abyss from which there was no return. I looked at the dreamlike figure before me, unable to tell whether our souls had truly met, or whether my subconscious had created this illusion, in an attempt to save me from myself. But whether she was real or not, I still had to make her a promise, so she could leave without worry. I understand now. This matter has reached its conclusion. You can rest easy. I will no longer live in the past. After hearing my promise, Emily finally revealed a joyful and peaceful smile. Immediately afterward, the cold, stormy night around us began to twist and dissolve. When I suddenly woke up, it was already the next morning. The storm had ended long ago. The brilliant sun hung high in the freshly washed sky. I had been unconscious the entire night. The instant I woke up, I felt that the darkness inside my heart had been completely swept away. The storm had passed, and the sky was bright again. Everything around me had become clearer than ever. I looked around and discovered that I was still lying on the rooftop of the abandoned building from last night. Puddles of rainwater surrounded me, yet the clothes on my body were unexpectedly almost dry. I did not know whether the strong wind on the rooftop had dried them, or whether it was some inexplicable miracle. I stood up and looked at Brookhaven in the distance, bathed in sunlight. Whether it had been a dream or real no longer mattered. I would leave it at that. Through the strange dream last night, I had finally understood everything that happened in my previous life. Emily's death had never been merely an accident, nor had it been inevitable. It had been caused by the devastation of her broken family. countless accidental coincidences, and despair pushed to its absolute limit, all piling upon one another until they created the tragedy. As long as I was here, I would never allow that ending to happen again. When I returned home, the apartment was completely silent. I quietly stepped into the living room and, with a single glance, saw Emily wrapped in that thin blanket, curled up asleep on the sofa. The thunder, lightning, wind, and rain had been violent last night. Because she was afraid of thunder, she had not returned to the comfortable guest room. Instead, she had curled up on the living room sofa. I knew she must have been waiting for me to come home, looking at her peaceful, sleeping face, and feeling the depth of her dependence on me. I could not help revealing a gentle smile. I walked over and pulled the fallen blanket back over her. Only then did I turn and return to my room. I had spent the entire night outside in the rain, so I quickly washed myself clean and soaked in hot water, driving the chill from my body. When I dressed and returned to the living room, Emily was still sleeping soundly. She must have stayed awake very late last night because she was worried about me. Seeing her sleeping so peacefully, I could not bear to wake her. What had passed should remain in the past. From this day forward, I would live only for the girl before me.